So welcome back to Module 4, the final module out of the self-care training that you're joining us on. So the last module is going to be on evaluating self-care strategies and creating your plan. If you remember, we began to talk about what was self-care. In Module 3, we talked a little bit more about, how can you define it for yourself and what does that look like? And in this module, we're going to walk you through how to create your own self-care plan and continue to evaluate that over time. So we hope you really kind of open your mind as you do this and kind of explore what might work for you. So welcome.
So when Wanda and I were thinking about how do we know when our self-care is working, we kind of we broke it up, and in a minute we're both going to share our ways of doing it, but we kind of broke it up into when we know things are going well and maybe when things aren't going as well. So we'll talk about that. But before we kind of talk about our specific scenarios, we want you to be just kind of thinking a little bit about that this strategy of how you evaluate your self-care may work for you. It may not work for you. You might come up with something better. But just like the self-care plan that you create in a little bit is going to be very individualized and unique to you, so is this list of how you know if your self-care is working. So we've talked throughout this whole training about really tuning in to what's coming up for you, tuning into that inner dialogue and really starting to understand what you need versus what other people need or what you think other people think you need. So we really want you to be, again, kind of tuning in and starting to think about, how do I show up in the world when my self-care is working and I'm, in a good place? And then how do I show up in the world, in my personal life and in my work when maybe things aren't going as well, or I'm super stressed out, or those sorts of things. So let me share my example first. So I know that my self-care is working, and you'll see things over here in this column. I called it that I'm in self. So this is a term that, through my own work of polyvagal theory, that for me, that term really resonates, of being in self. And what does it look like when I'm in self? How do I show up in the world? Well, I feel productive, and I am productive. I feel inspired. I feel effective. I'm efficient in the work that I'm doing. I feel really connected with my colleagues. I'm social. I'm open to connections. I'm open to new ideas. I'm seeking things out. So versus being in a really passive role, I'm kind of seeking and engaging into the world. I feel excited. I have lots of positive energy. And what I've noticed is that my clothing also really reflects my positive space. So I might, experiment with my hair, or I might, wear new accessories or accessorize a little bit more than I usually do. So, or the colors that I choose to wear are maybe a little bit brighter. So I've noticed that when my clothing is a little bit more positive and fun, that usually means I'm in a better space as well. Now, when I'm not doing as well, I call that my dysregulated space. So I feel overwhelmed. I might feel like I'm racing against the clock all the time, that there's just not enough time in the day. I feel pressured, and I kind of present with a pressured energy about myself. I might be constantly checking or refreshing my email. My sleep gets wonky. So I'm either sleeping too much or not sleeping through the night or having trouble falling asleep. Just sleep gets weird for me. I doubt my abilities. So I doubt whether I have what the job needs, the task needs. I feel underappreciated and undervalued by those around me. I might become disillusioned by either my job or the world in general. I feel exhausted. And again, it's not just I need a good night's sleep. It's exhausted. Everything is just taking it out of me. When I'm really having a hard time, I start to question my career choice. Why did I go into social work? Why did I think that was a good idea? I withdraw from people at work, in my personal life. I might be seeking an exit strategy from my job, thinking I don't even want to do this anymore. Very negative. So glass half empty kind of perspective that I can't really reframe. And I really don't care about what I wear that day. I may be pick up the outfit that was tossed on the chair from a couple days ago, and I don't even care if I'm wearing it again. So once you can start to kind of recognize these warning signs or these flags that are coming up for you, either to affirm that you're in a good space, or to kind of give you an idea of where maybe that things aren't going as well, you can then adjust your self-care to try to help get yourself back into what I call self. So I'm going to let Wanda share hers as well in just a minute.
I just want to say before Rebecca switches, it's interesting because when I'm listening to Rebecca talk about this today, it almost shows that when she says she's doing well, that she's engaged, she's healthy, she's taking care of herself. And when she talks about not being or being dysregulated, she's actually describing some of what we've talked about as burnout, right? Or compassion fatigue. Or so some of those things show up at different times, but that's really what we're talking about when we start to feel some of these things. So it just kind of struck me that even when we don't always label it, that's some of the reminders and the red flags that come up. So
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Good connection.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about mine. And I do want to say that as we've embarked on this path, and Rebecca and I both shared that we both struggle with self-care some, it's interesting because one of the things that I've come to realize is so often as a social worker, in my role as a manager or a supervisor, I always say you shouldn't really ask anybody under you to do something you wouldn't do. But when it came to this, it was a real challenge. And I wondered why. And I thought, you know why? Because if I'm talking about, how to do a training or how am I doing trauma-based therapy, that's about me working with someone else. But this work is about internal. This work is about looking inside of ourselves. And I will say we as social workers should probably be a lot better at it than we are, but we forward face that out and we don't turn it around. So this was a challenge for me, both doing this and doing my own self-care plan. So if you feel that, I want you to know that it doesn't matter how long we've done that sometimes when we're asked to reflect, it stops us in our tracks for a minute. So I wanted to name mine, I am calm versus I'm agitated, because that's often how I think of when I'm doing well and I'm healthy, I'm grounded in a different way. And when I'm not, I'm agitated. So some of what I've listed out is when I am calm or I'm in a good place, I feel content. I'm able to sit still, focus on my work. I feel gratitude on a regular basis without even really needing to focus on it. I try to speak calm and normal. I'm a fast talker always, but I'm more relaxed. I'm more focused. I'm more engaged with my colleagues and my work, and I'm more confident in what I'm doing. When I'm agitated, then again, some of the signs that we've talked about even in burnout is, having a hard time sitting still, racing thoughts, having a hard time to focus on the work. My talk is more pressured. I jump from one topic to another, or sometimes one project to another. I'm not able to finish anything. I have some days at the end of the day when I look at my desk and I'm like, oh my gosh, I worked on 7 things and none are done. So that reminds me, tomorrow you need to get organized and do this differently. I often have grand ideas. I'll call some of my colleagues and have really grand ideas. I feel unproductive because I am unproductive. I'm more jittery and I'm more defensive sometimes when somebody points that out to me. So I want to stay in that calm place, and I try to remember these are some of my red flags when I feel them. So as you do this, really think about that and spend some time. This isn't about what I offered or Rebecca offered. This is about, again, what you think about when you think about what are my characteristics or descriptors when I'm doing really well and things are going well at work or at home versus when things are really falling apart for you.
Mm-hmm. Right. And there will be a place on the self-care plan, which we're about to open up and share with you in just a minute. There will be a place where you can kind of start a draft of this. I've done this in a couple of different ways. I've done it in my professional world, which is kind of what I shared with you, but then I've also done it in my personal life. Like when maybe I need a little extra, care in my personal life, I show up a little bit differently there. And so this can be a really, helpful exercise and again, it's just kind of being aware of how are you showing up in the world and what does that mean for those around you, but then also most importantly for yourself and how you can kind of increase your self-care or maybe even take care of yourself in a different way. So you'll have this template of this self-care worksheet in the module. So you'll be able to print this off and complete it. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, so hopefully you can see it pretty well. But as Wanda stated, we did both do this exercise, and it kind of surprised me how challenging it was. I'm just going to be honest, not so, like I could think of a few, but it it was challenging to think of as many as spaces as we offered. So we want to preface this by saying, this is yours. This is customizable. You can add things to this. You can answer these questions. You can add new things on. You can change the way something is written or framed. This, again, is for you. We're giving you the framework, and then you can really customize this to make this be about like what resonates the most with you and what's the most helpful.
And I do just want to throw out, if you think it would be helpful and you want to go ahead and pause us and print this, if you want to have this so you can start jotting things as we go through it and talk, you can do that. If not, again, you're going to have it, you're going to be able to do it. But if you feel, sometimes I like to do that. So if that's what you want to do, please print it and have that available for yourself. So, but as we go through it, hopefully you can begin to kind of think of yourself as we talk about this.
Yeah. And we always like to kind of start that by when we first created this, and we adapted this self-care worksheet from another plan that we've acknowledged at the end of this. But it really felt very much to me like kind of what you might do with a client, like a little bit of a safety plan with a client. And it really is. It's a self-care safety plan, right? So in those moments, as it says here, like self-care is really easy and it comes naturally, and it's just kind of built in when things are going well, when you're happy, when you're well rested, when kind of everything's going your way. Self-care just happens naturally. But self-care is really hard when you're stressed and overwhelmed. And it's also really hard to remember the things that work for you, or to help set boundaries around the things that don't help you in those moments. And so this is really your personal self-care plan that you can activate, that you can put into motion as needed. So again, as we're going through this, if this feels a little bit like a client safety plan, it's because, well, it sort of is. So I'll let Wanda kind of start us here with the first item.
Good. So the first one is make a list of what you can do when you begin to feel stressed, overwhelmed, or anxious. What will help you relax? For example, ideas are slow breathing, reading, taking a walk, calling a friend, visualization. Now, keep in mind that we're going to ask as we go through this for you to think about activities at work and activities during personal time or at home. And think about, like, again, when Rebecca and I did this, we probably, I don't know if we added this or not, but we think of slow breathing as, oh, why can't you do that? For some people, that's going to work. Some it's not. So that doesn't have to be, or we didn't put journaling or, so again, even though we've given you ideas, really think about how will that work for me? I will say most of us in this field have tried some of these things throughout our career, journaling, even if we did it when we were in school, or we had a general sense if those things work, coloring, drawing. So think about that. And if you've never done something like, say, coloring, maybe you add that and try that and see how it works. So open mind is what we're asking. So as we think about this, what I want to do is maybe throw out at least one of the things that I've put on my plan for at work and personal time. And then Rebecca, I'll ask her and she'll add. So we'll each add at least one thing. So for mine at work, I'm actually going to share two things because there's two things I put in here that really work for me. And one is deep breathing. One of the things about deep breathing for me is when I stop and breathe and count to 10, it forces me to focus on the counting and the breathing, and it takes me away from the frustration or the anger. So it removes me from that. It's not the deep breathing for me. It's the focus on something else. So I have to focus in order to count and do that. So that works for me. When I'm really frustrated, I can stop and do that, and I can do it easily at work. The second thing, which I've learned over some time, and I forget to do it, but when I do it, it works well, is when I start to get really stressed, I smile. When you smile, those muscles alter what's happening in your body, and it's hard to continue to stay frustrated or angry or even exhausted when you smile. So I try to think of things at work that I can do if I'm frustrated in the middle of a meeting with 40 people, right? So walk, you might be able to, but if you're in that meeting and you're frustrated, but these are things, the deep breathing or the smiling, you can do in the middle of that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And for me, in terms of work, And I think I talked about this previously, I need sort of a change of environment that kind of breaks things up for me. So the breathing doesn't necessarily work as well for me. I think breathing is always calming and it helps to regulate your system. But for me, I actually have to get up and kind of like move to a different area. And so sometimes that just means getting up and going to the restroom and like taking a minute and coming back in. Or I go, like, sometimes I don't have a lot of time at work, but I might go and take a walk around like the parking lot or a walk around the building to, again, just kind of change the scenery and shake up the energy a little bit for me. So that's my kind of go-to, is like get up and move my body to a different area.
Good. So what are some things you can do when you start to feel stressed or overwhelmed or anxious at home? What can help you relax, or your personal time? And again, really think about this. And for me, again, one of the things that at home, or actually there's two things at home, but I love flowers. When I garden, it's not vegetables. I'll go to a stand and buy them, but flowers. So sometimes I go outside and I weed for a minute, or I pick a flower and bring it in, put it in a vase, or that's something. It's about the calmness and the beauty that really helps me at home. The other thing I love sometimes is music. And sometimes I'll even just say to my husband, like, I'm going for a ride, and just crank the music, right? And when I can be in that closed space with that vibration, sometimes that just changes my mood. So those are things that are simple, they don't cost money, and they help refocus me.
Well, Wanda, we have found a self-care strategy that works for both of us, because that was on my list too, of getting in the car, going for a ride, and jamming out to music. So that's awesome. The other one that I want to share that I found recently, and I'm surprised how much I like it. So I don't love exercising. It's not my favorite thing. I love to play tennis, and that's going to show up somewhere else in my self-care plan. But I don't in general like to do a lot of other exercise. I love to go for walks, but like, yes, I'm moving at a good clip, but I'm not like, sweating or anything. But I think part of the reason why I don't like it is because it's just a little too long for me. It's just a little too long. So I found these 5-minute exercise videos or stretching videos or whatever on YouTube, where you like say, okay, I want to do 5 minutes of arm exercises, and 5 minutes is doable. Like, I can do it. And I am really surprised what a positive impact just 5 minutes of body movement has on me. Like, it really, again, movement is obviously really important to me. I talked about that with my work activity, but just kind of getting your body doing a little something different, and like it makes your chemicals in your body flow a little differently. You just feel like you have a little more space and breathing room. So I encourage you can do these 5-minute videos. Who doesn't have 5 minutes? I can commit to 5 minutes of exercise. So just throwing that out there. All right. So the next one is, what do you like to do when you're happy and you have free time? So again, this is really getting at in those moments when we're seeing the glass half empty, or when we can't find any redeeming qualities in the work that we're doing, or the work or the life that we're living, those sorts of things. It's nice to have these reminders of like, oh yeah, there are times when I enjoy my life, and there are times when I enjoy my work, and there are times, so what are those things? Like, what are those things that remind you that even if you can't feel them in the moment, that if you can go through the motions, they might connect you back to those feelings? So my example for work, so what are the things that I like to do when I'm happy and I have free time at work? We have, in the office that I work in behind the office space, or the campus, I should say, there's a gigantic cemetery. And it is like, if I have extra time in my day and it's not raining, or the weather's, pretty good, I love to go for a walk through that cemetery. That I need a little bit extra time. That can't be my 5-minute like stroll around the campus. That I need to have like at least 20-25 minutes to do that. But man, when I come back from that, it's like a renewed sense of hope, and all is good in the world.
So remember, Rebecca said this is hard. Well, I have to be honest with you. When I read this one, I thought, well, I can tell you about what I like to do in my free time, but I thought, I don't have much free time during my workday. So when I go to my office and work, I work, and I'm okay with that. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about how I end that and kind of cut that off. But so I thought, I don't really know that I do a lot. I will say one little thing I do on occasion. If I'm waiting on a meeting, or I've got 10-15 minutes from a meeting, I have this, I love to shop online and put things in my cart that I never buy. And it's one of those things that I just like to do. I know I'm never buying it, but I'll go to a store that I really like and I'll pick out. I even, think about how much it's going to cost. I don't like go wild, but then I never buy it. So I do that on rare occasions at work, but generally my work is my work. So
Yeah. And that's something that I've been thinking a lot about lately is that, we do have busy jobs and we have busy days, but I do find that I come home a little less depleted when I have had a half an hour of kind of like free time in my day to go and either go for that walk or to go out and grab a sandwich somewhere off campus that I don't usually go to. So that's one of the things that I'm going to try to challenge myself moving forward is when I have those days where I have the flexibility to take a half an hour just to kind of like shut my work brain off, that I do end up having more energy in the evening when I do that. So
and it's healthy. We should all do it. We should all take breaks and step away. I mean, absolutely, every once in a while. So I'm not saying that it's good that I say I just work all day, because I agree with Rebecca. We should have those breaks.
Yeah. It's not, neither Wanda nor I are very practiced at that, but I want to challenge myself a little around that. In terms of my personal time, this, like Wanda said, was a little bit easier to think about, but I like to just like lie around and read, honestly, look out the window and watch the trees blow in the wind. Like you just like playing tennis, that was something that I shared, but that one's a lot easier for me. There's lots of things that I like to do, which is good.
So one of the things that I started, I don't know, maybe about a year ago, is I'm definitely a coffee drinker. That's my drug of choice. So for me, even during the workday, 7 days a week, if I can carve out a little time, if I'm not getting ready to go somewhere, I love to get up in the morning and have my cup of coffee and play Word with friends. I set myself at half an hour at the most, and I have several people that I play with. And that's what I like to do in the morning, because it's just something, it challenges my brain in a different way, but it's fun. And I connect. I have a friend in Hawaii I play with Rebecca. I have another friend in South Carolina I play. So it's kind of fun, and that's one of those things. I've never been a game person, but I enjoy that.
Yep. And again, we're sharing these personal kind of anecdotal pieces just because it might jog something in your mind, but please remember that this is really for you, and take or leave our examples. Again, we're just really trying to provide some food for thought for you. And then in terms of who are your positive support people that you can connect with, people that you can process with or surround yourself with. So I found this one particularly interesting to think about at work and in your personal life, that, again, I found one more easier than the other one. But it's also really interesting to think about, are the positive people that you identify people that you have easy access to, or does it take a little bit of extra to kind of be able to connect with them? So Wanda, I'm going to let you share your examples of who are those really positive or support people that you can reach out to during your workday, and then also again in your personal time.
So this was another this section here, C, that was a bit challenging for me. And I will say one of the things that, even this journey for myself around self-care that I've come to realize is I'm not somebody that reaches out and talks about. I talk to a lot of people, I have a lot of acquaintances, I have a lot of people I hang with, but I don't talk a lot about a lot of personal issues with people outside. So it made me realize that. So I thought, what do you do with that? So at work, I have a very good colleague that I call every once in a while, an event whenever I have to, and that helps me refocus and do what I need to do. So that's the one under my work one.
Yes. And I also have a very good colleague, that like a trusted colleague that I feel like I can talk to. But what I also found interesting was that for me, it was really important. So I'm married, I have a husband. It was really important for me to add him on the list, because he is somebody that if I'm, feeling stressed, I feel like I want to connect with him, even though he's not, immersed in my work. He kind of can help me almost pull myself out of the tunnel vision on my work. So I was happy and surprised that he showed up in my work list.
That's good.
Yeah. In terms of your personal world, Wanda, who did you include?
So that's interesting, because I do want to say one of the things that again, sometimes I get really busy. I don't think any of us use a phone in the way we used to, or maybe letters in the way we used to. So Probably about 3 or 4 years ago, I have a very good friend I mentioned in Hawaii who we were college roommates, and she and I have sat every Sunday night between 5 or 6. We FaceTime and we spent at least an hour, and we generally talk about nothing, but we laugh and we talk. Sometimes we talk about our week a little bit, but if I didn't have that scheduled, I would never really reach out. We're on a different time. So sometimes self-care can even be something like that that's set. And I have to say, I look forward to that every Sunday night so she and I can connect.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good one. And I put a therapist on there. So I have a therapist that I see once a month, whether I need to see her or not. And I, if I feel like I need to go more than when we schedule again, I just say, can we do it 2 weeks instead of a month? But I, like I said, I keep that standing appointment there just in case. So just in case I start to feel overwhelmed or something's come up that I really need it, I want to make sure that I continue to engage with and nurture that relationship that I have with this person, because it's helpful in the times that I really need that space, that processing time. It's really helpful. And so for me, it makes sense for me to just have it, like Wanda said, routine, scheduled, like it's there if I need it. And even if I don't need it, I always leave the office thinking, well, I'm glad I came today. That was helpful. So
And I do think one of the things that's important as you think about this entire journey of self-care, even the other modules, but also what you're doing today, is one of the most important things I think to keep in mind is when things are going great, you don't need this, right? So what Rebecca said, when we schedule things, it's there for us. So if we don't need it, it's refreshing. When we do need it, it's scheduled, because what happens is when life starts to fall apart, we don't always say, oh, I'm going to pick up the phone and schedule, to see my therapist tomorrow. Or so remember that it's when you need it the most that it's hardest to fit it in. So if you schedule it, you keep doing it.
yep, absolutely. All right. So section D, this one I found particularly interesting to think about as related to work, right? Because work isn't always associated with tranquility or restorative environments, but this one is all about, again, like, where are the spaces? Where are the places that you can go to find that tranquility or that calm? Like, where are those places that you go that you really can just feel like you can shut everything off? You can let all your guards down, all your defenses down, and you can just be. It's the sense of getting away, even if you're not away. And it really allows you to kind of be fully immersed in the space that you're in, to not be distracted by everything else that might be going on with your brain. And this is really important. It's compatible with your preferences. So for example, I live relatively close to the ocean, but I prefer lakes. So if I'm in a hard space and I really need to go someplace where like can be really grounding for me, even though it would be super easy and convenient for me to just pop over the ocean, I actually prefer to go to like a river or a lake. And so be thinking about that it's not necessarily some place that you go to because it's convenient, but it's some place that's really compatible with your system and what you need. So Wanda, what was it like for you to think about this at work and in your personal life?
So again, it's challenging in some ways. And the other thing I want to say is I'm not at the office as Rebecca is as much. So I'm usually in the office about a week out of the month. It's easier when I'm in the office. Now, when I'm in the office at the university, I love to get up and say I'm going to take a walk, or walk down to Starbucks and get a cup of coffee, right? Or walk over to the cafeteria and get a cup of coffee. It's so easy and it's so refreshing. I have a harder time when I'm at home. But one of the things I do summer, spring, and fall, not in the winter, is I have a nice deck chair and I love just going and sitting. It's in a place where usually the sun comes around by 10 and we'll stay there until 5. So I'll step outside a minute, if it's morning coffee, bottle of water, and just sit outside a few minutes in the sunshine, and it refocuses me. But I have to remember to, as Rebecca said, to build that in a way that I haven't done well with.
Yeah. Yeah, and going through this actually made me feel a lot of gratitude for where I work, because the university has been very intentional about creating some nice spaces. There's like a meditation room here, which that doesn't really appeal to me. But there are these kind of like Adirondack chairs, like placed throughout the campus. So there's like a few that, again, kind of like Wanda was talking about, the sun hits them just right. So if you like pop out, you can go sit in a chair out there for a few minutes, and the campus is very well manicured and landscapes. It's very pretty. The cemetery is also right here. So if I pop out, like there's some beautiful trees in there. And then also like even just the classroom space that we have here, if again, as I talked about, just kind of getting up and going into a different space, sometimes just being able to go into one of the private study rooms or one of the classrooms here if it's not being used, and just kind of like let yourself completely unplug from wherever you are and just get grounded. I think, again, I appreciated that going through this exercise because it made me feel a lot of gratitude towards where I work. And I wonder if for some of those of you who have the opportunity, or this part of your role is to be thinking about the space in your office, and can you create some intentional spaces that people might be able to help you kind of design, or to put things in there that allow them to have these restorative experiences or environments in the workplace. And then during personal time, kind of like Wanda said, there's a chair it's actually inside my house that kind of looks out these windows into the backyard at like the trees. And I just love just kind of like staring out there, seeing the birds, seeing kind of like whatever's happening out there. So that for me is, I can kind of just unplug from anything else. I can completely focus on what's happening out there. And it just always seems like there's like a life lesson waiting right outside the window every time I sit in that chair. So that's one of my favorite places to be. You want to take E?
Yes. So what can I do, or what can you do to help you face the day? For example, how can you focus on one task, avoid distractions, make a priority list each morning, practice positive self-talk or a mantra, surround yourself with positive people, eat well, exercise. And keep in mind, when we talk about what can I do to help me face the day, when we go into an office, sometimes we have limited control over what some of that can be. Or even if we're working at home, we have limited control. So really thinking about what control do we have, and how can we kind of impact that day so we do stay focused and do what we need to do. So for mine, one of the best things for me to do is, as I said earlier, when I'm not doing well, I'm jumping around, is make a list. I love making a list in the morning. I'll sit down on sometimes I do this before I start work, because I work from home most days. I go in my office, my cup of coffee, and I make my list. I look through everything left scattered everywhere from the day before I shut it up, and I make my list. I love checking off on my list during the day. So that's one of my favorite things to do.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's on my list also. But one of the strategies that I've really found helps me is to, I come into the office pretty much at the same time every day, but I give myself a little bit of buffer time before my first meeting starts, so that I can kind of come in and I don't have to like hit the ground sprinting. Like I can take a minute, I can check all my emails from, the evening before. I can make sure I'm prepared for my first meeting of the day. And so I build in a little bit of time, block myself out a little bit of time first thing in the morning to kind of just get myself acclimated with, like I said, before I have to like show up and be fully functioning everywhere I'm going. So that is a strategy that really worked well for me with work.
So for personal time, I want to say one of the things that I do to help me face the day is I've worked really hard over the last few years to allow myself to be unfocused in my personal time. I'm one of those people that my daughter said growing up, like I never get up in the morning, come down in my pajamas. I'm somebody gets up, gets in the shower, gets herself ready, gets it right, has her cup of coffee. So on my downtime, I try harder and harder to get up on a Saturday or Sunday and be unfocused and do what I need to do. Not to have a list, not to have an agenda, but figuring out how to chill a little more. So that's one of those things that might be a little different than others, but it's important that I begin to kind of allow myself to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And for me, it's that regularly scheduled stuff in my personal life that I'm somebody who, like, I mean, I think I mentioned, I don't think I mentioned it on this training, but during the pandemic, when we were all working from home, I realized that like 2 weeks had gone by and I like hadn't left the house. And I was like, oh my gosh, I got to get out of here. So I'm somebody who, if I don't like schedule it in, I can really easily lose motivation to go do anything. So what I can do to kind of help me face the day is make sure that I have like my regularly scheduled tennis in each week, and that I do regularly scheduled walks, and that I actually do them. So that's going to help me even if I'm not doing it that particular day, but having it on the books, knowing it's coming up, and then getting the benefits from it when I do it helps me kind of like keep routine and even mood throughout the week. So then thinking about F, so we want you to be thinking about enlisting all of the things, like the activities, the things that you maybe gravitate towards or engage in that aren't helpful for you when you feel stressed. So for example, drinking too much caffeine or drinking alcohol, using other drugs, negative self-talk, seeking places like gossiping, going to the water cooler and gossiping, or interacting with people at work that either bring you down or engage in that kind of that gossip train, which doesn't help. Going to people who end up making you feel more agitated, more fired up, more activated, staying in bed all day, avoiding the things that you need to do, skipping workouts. So I think Wanda mentioned that one of the activities that we have in our seminar courses here that are connected to the students' practicums are self-care. Each week they kind of talk about what self-care the students have done. And one of the things that I noticed was that they'd say, oh, I took the day off from everything. I just binge watched Netflix from like 9 to 5. I just watch. And it felt awesome in the moment. And then I realized I had so many assignments due and I got super stressed out. So that's not self-care, right? That's not self-care when it actually ends up creating more stress than positive, like decompression. So what are those things that we do go to kind of escape, numb out, that end up creating kind of more challenges rather than self-care? Wanda, what you put down here for your examples?
So one of the things I talked a little bit about is my ability to not focus sometimes or to kind of jump tasks. One of the things I have to be very aware of is too much coffee for me. So in the morning, if I have 2 cups, I'm good. When I have the third, it's my red flag that I now know the minute I head for that 3rd cup of coffee, I'm like, okay, go back to your office and get focused. You don't need that 3rd cup. So that for me is a way to be distracted, but that makes me jittery.
Yep. And I think for me, one of the things, even though I love this, one of the things that I can do when I'm starting to feel a little frustrated or stressed out at work is I start fantasizing about the French fries that I'm going to get at lunch. And once in a while, that's fine. But when I have them like 3 or 4 days in a row, that's when I know that I'm like trying to escape something else, or trying to replace negative feelings with a positive experience. So when I'm going towards the fried food at work, that's when I know, maybe you're feeling a little stressed. And maybe you shouldn't have them 4 days in a row because they hurt your stomach eventually. So that's why I think it's fine if like French fries are fine for you, but for me, French fries, like fried food, eventually hurts my stomach. So that's what I need to stay away from in those times when I'm feeling all fired up. In terms of my personal time, there are people that I know if I'm having a hard day or if I'm overly stressed with something and they reach out, I have to really be thoughtful about whether I want to engage with them at that moment or whether I need to kind of like slow that down and wait to respond. So I think that's really important. That happens to me at work too. There are some people that if I'm like, if my brain's going a million miles per hour, I have to be very thoughtful in how I respond to them because sometimes it doesn't always go well. And so if I'm overly stressed or kind of doing 12 things at once, it's not a good idea for me to respond to those people because you have to be more thoughtful, intentional about the way that you respond. So that's my answer on that one.
And I think that's because mine's very similar to that, because again, I have a couple of family members that are challenging. Doesn't mean that we can cut people out that are challenging, but I make a choice when to engage with them. So, and that was one of mine that I think about, like when I'm in a better place, that's when I reach out. And when I'm not already, or it's been a long day, I'm not going to reach out because that's going to tip me over. So sometimes we have to engage in things that are not great, but we can make choices when to do that. So
yeah,
I agree. Yep.
Well said. All right, you want to take us through G?
Sure. And this one can be very personal to you, but really think of the positive things or the mantras. And we talked about this a little bit, maybe in I think our second module, about this idea of some of this self-talk. So what do you say to yourself when you need to? Like, you got this, you have the skills, you're kind, you're bright, you're human. I say that a lot, you're human, you'll make mistakes, but really thinking about some of that. One of the things that I try to tell myself a lot, and I said this to my daughter the other day, you have to savor the small victories. And I remember that a lot of days I said to her, a lot of days you get kicked in the ankles, and that's going to happen. And, so if we can remember that, we're not going to have hits every day as social workers, social service care, those in hospice, those in hospitals, we're not going to have great days every day. Savor the small ones and remind yourself that.
Yeah. That's good. And the one that really resonates the most to me is around the you're human, you're going to make mistakes, or the way that I put it was like, mistakes are okay, you're human. And I think for those of us who maybe struggle with a little bit of perfectionism, like really being able to kind of like recognize the discomfort around some of the mistakes that we make, and try to reframe them as learning opportunities, and really try to like believe that they're learning opportunities, and that on the other side of it, you become a stronger, better, more capable person. So.
And under personal, one of the things that I've kind of got my own that I've developed, even maybe over the last year, even, that's kind of what I call it is people, not projects. And I remind myself, like, dust doesn't matter. Like, if you want to go do something, go do it. Like, you don't have to stay home and, clean the kitchen, or those things will be there. You'll get to them. I'm not saying I've let my standards go, but I don't have to spend all weekend, which I might have, cleaned a house. And so it's people, not projects. Go do what you want to do. Life is short.
That's a good one. Yeah. And I can't remember where I read this, but a long time ago, I read something that said, like, innately you have what you need. And for some reason that really resonated with me. So I think probably because, as I shared earlier, sometimes I feel like I don't have what I need, or I feel incapable, or that I don't have the right skills. So just reminding myself that, like, you do have what you need to show up in all of the places that you have to show up. Sometimes you're going to show up in a better space than others, but that you do have what you need. That's always really helpful for me.
Good. Do you mind if I take this one?
Yeah, you take that one because you're really good at this one.
Good. This one's probably one of my favorite ones. And as a new social worker, this was a real challenge for me. And I don't know if we talk a lot about this in a lot of trainings, or if you talk about this at your job, but how do you transition your day from home to work? And when you leave work, back to home again? How do you turn your day off? How do you leave whatever's going on? And, what can you do to have an intentional transition? It's harder if you work from home, but you still should be thinking about it. If you haven't thought about it, it's like your work bleeds into your home, and your home bleeds into your work. And that can become a challenge. So one of the things that I shared when I started training on self-care is, when I was a new social worker, I worked at a crisis unit, and I lived about 45 minutes. I traveled daily, and I would leave work, and there would be things going on about safety or clients. And a lot of our clients who called were anonymous, and they were able to do that. But I carried that home, and it was such a burden. I found I would be going to sleep at night and still worrying. I'd get up in the morning still thinking. So I realized at one point on my own that I've got to figure out a way to kind of not carry this with me all the time. You almost feel that heaviness when you do that. So I found a tree. And if some of you are from the Aroostook County, you might know where this is, but I found this tree by this little shack, and it was kind of in between. And I decided that tree was where it would be like my burden tree. That's where I would drop things. So when I left work in the evening, I got to that tree, and I thought, okay, now you're going home. And then after I passed a tree, I would think about home. What am I going to have for dinner? What does my daughter need tonight? What's our plans? In the morning, I got up. On the way back to work, like, what am I going to have to do this evening? Whatever personal. When I hit the tree, I picked up my burden of work or my concerns, and I went back to work. And that became my transition. And it was so clear for me. And I shared this. It was only one time ever that something had happened, and I didn't know if I could leave it. So I pulled over by the tree, and I sat there, and I thought, okay, I'm going to process a minute, because I can't break my transition rule. So I sat there and, thought about it, and then dropped my concerns or my worries and went on home. So I encourage you, whether, when Rebecca and I've done these trainings, we've heard from so many folks that talked about this, like, the notion of sitting outside and listening to a song before you go in, or making a note of something. But think about, And then the flip side, I want to share. I had somebody shared with me years ago that when they, and maybe I don't know if I shared this in one of the earlier modules, I don't know if I did, but they would come in and go to their bathroom for 5 minutes every night when they walked in the house. They said to their family, this is my time. So if you've never really thought about this, I would encourage you to really think about it. So I'm not going to share in this one because I've kind of done that, but I want you to think about what that transition is for you.
Yeah. And this one is really important to me, because when we went home for the pandemic and we're out, working from home for a couple of years, I found it extremely challenging because when you work out of the house, you do have kind of these natural breaks, right? Like where you're driving to work or you're driving home, and you can kind of separate that a little bit and do some transitional activities. When I worked from home, I struggled. I struggled and I never really got it. And as soon as we got the green light to come back to the office, I was here. But what I realized is that I also have these transitional activities that I do in the office. And one of them is that, so we were in a kind of an open office space where we're at like kind of individual cubicles or cubbies, but it's all open. So there's no like divider walls or anything. And some people like the overhead lights on and some people don't. And so a lot of times the overhead lights are either off or down low. And so I have these 2 lamps, one kind of on my desk and one standing next to my desk, that I turn on so that regardless of what other people need for lighting, I have the lighting that I need. So that is one thing that I've really realized helps me. Like when I come in and I turn the lights on, okay, I'm here, I'm at work, and I'm in work mode now. And then when I turn them off at the end of the day, it is a remarkable shift in energy. Even one of my colleagues who sits at another desk nearby said, I just felt that. I just felt like your workday is over and you're done. And how cool is that? And I thought, yeah, it really is. It's like literally shutting the switches off. And then I leave my work and I go home. Now I'm grateful that I'm in a job right now where I don't have like, numerous heavy client stories that I'm carrying with me at the end of the day. Sometimes there are some really tough student situations that we're dealing with, but for the most part, I'm able to kind of shut off that sort of task brain. Just in that simple, like switching off of the lights. So I encourage you, whether you're working at home or whether you're in the office, try the light switch thing. And it maybe will be helpful.
Good. It's good. And it is important. Think about this one, because like I said, I don't know that we talk a lot about this at our offices, how you transition. And I love hearing Rebecca, like with the lamp, because sometimes it's that simple, but it's something to you, this is when I start and this is when I end. And it kind of puts that closure for you morning and night. So wonderful.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's interesting because over the summer, I've also kind of developed a routine at home, which I'll share about. Like sometimes it's like, well, what do you mean like transitioning from home to work? Like, why do I need a transition? Well, I mean, I think for the same reasons that Wanda, you talked about, but one of the things, so when I leave the house over the summer, I leave and sometimes nobody else in my house is awake. So I leave a goodbye note to them so that when they get up, they can see that like I was thinking of them, but like it's like I've gone off to work and I'll see them when I get home. And that's something I actually forgot to leave the note this morning and I was distraught about it. So I had to, send a text and check in, and my family members at home were like, we were thinking about that. We really missed your note this morning. And I was thinking it's something that's helpful for them and it's helpful for me. So you can be thinking about those things. That's the way that I transition out of my home life into my work day from there. And then at the end of the day here at work, I shut my lights off and I transition back to home life. All right, so this is what we told you that we would give you kind of that opportunity to think about how will you assess and evaluate your self-care plan. You can build this in also, this kind of assessment and evaluation, build it into something else that happens at work, like your annual review or your weekly supervision, your monthly supervision, whatever you have. You can just be thinking about this is a kind of a way to keep yourself accountable, to continue to check in and edit and update and see how things are going. And then this is the kind of the lists that we made, that we're kind of like giving you space to think about that. Again, you might have 12 things that you want to put here. This is customizable. You put whatever you want, but you'll know that your plan is working because at work, you're going to be showing up with what attributes or what characteristics or what behaviors. And then in your personal life, you know that your self-care is working when you're able to show up how in your personal life. So we encourage you to think about also, like, where can you keep this? Do you keep it in your desk? Do you, keep it at home somewhere? You want to take a kind of a snapshot on your phone and make every time you see that picture, it kind of reminds you to be thinking about your self-care. Think about where you can put this or what kind of strategy you can use to remind yourself that this is a real thing in your life and it's a tool for you.
And if you have an Outlook calendar, can you mark on that? So it'll pop up, actually put a slot in, I don't know, 8 to 8:30 on a, 3 months down the road, and it pops up and says, reassess my self-care. Figure out ways that you can put it in. And I encourage you that when you look at doing this, talk to your family or people in your life. So, if you have children, talk to them about it. If, your spouse, your significant others, your friends, your roommates, wouldn't it be nice if we all just openly talked about what we do for our self-care and we accepted that we're worth it and we should be doing these things?
Yes. Yeah. And to that point too, that like engage some allies in this with you at work and in your personal life. So, I have to admit that Wanda is kind of one of those people, and she might be like, hey, Rebecca, how you doing? Like, is everything going okay? Like, do you need a minute? Do you want to talk about anything? And then at home, like my husband is very good at saying like, your type A is really coming out right now. Like, are you feeling stressed out? Like, do you need a minute? Do you need a self-care? We've negotiated and we've learned to sort of give each other feedback in a way that works for each other. So like using the type A language works for me, and he has my permission to use that language, but negotiate with the people around you. How can they give you feedback in a way that's going to feel meaningful and gentle and kind and loving towards you? But they can also, again, be kind of your allies in this self-care journey. Sometimes we're so caught up with whatever's going on that we're too far in the weeds to recognize those warning signs. So, let other people help you recognize some of those warning signs.
Absolutely. And again, we've talked about this a little bit as we started, but we've come a long way in self-care. And the fact now that it's been added to our code of ethics and added to many codes of ethics around, social service workers, that this is something that I think we're reassessing and looking at differently. And as I said, it's not just something that's fluff or going to a spa or taking a day. It really is about building into your life a way to begin to take care of yourself in a healthy, happy way that you can integrate everything you need to. So please think about this. And again, take parts of this that you can use. Whatever's going to work for you out of this, please take it and use it.
That's right. And you might not like this plan at all, but it kind of jogs some ideas for you and you want to use them in a different format. Do whatever you want. There's no judgment around that.
So for your reflective journal, your last reflective journal that we're going to ask you to write is to really think about what are the biggest takeaways for you from this training. What learning and or self-care strategies will you work to incorporate in your personal life? And what information from this training can you take back and share at work or with your colleagues? And I truly hope you think about this and maybe take this back. Talk to supervisors, talk to people you supervise, talk to those around you in the office, and really think about, because one of the things that we had said is self-care, according to the code, is built into the employer's responsibility as well as yours. So how can you take some of this back?
Absolutely. And really the biggest takeaway that we hope that you can take from this training, one of the biggest takeaways is that, just be patient and keep trying. So take the first step in faith. You don't have to see the whole staircase, really just take the first step. And that really kind of sums up for me, at least, like what my experience of working towards well-being and positive self-care strategies is that I have these gains, and I 2 steps forwards and 2 steps back sometime. And again, I think the most important part is that you recognize that it's valuable, that it's a need, that it's our ethical responsibility, and that it's something worth working towards. It's something worth having some discipline, some routine, and carving out and prioritizing some energy to put towards this. So we hope you enjoyed this training. It was certainly our pleasure to be able to share this information to you, with you. And we did share a lot of kind of personal anecdotal information that we hope is helpful in really illustrating that everyone has their own unique experience and journey with self-care and what will work and what won't work for you. And so we really hope that nothing that we've shared with you is a prescription. It's really just to generate ideas and for you to go off on your own self-care journey. We've included some additional tools and references materials for you. I'll show them briefly here, but we'll also put them in the module so you have them. You can do your own additional research. And there's our references. But really, truly just want to say thank you for taking the time to go through this and to put time and energy towards your own health and well-being and self-care. We hope that you found this helpful.
Thank you.